Hello. On behalf of Concerned Lay Catholics, I am grateful and so honored to have Dr. Karlijn Demasure with me today by Zoom. Dr. Demasure has had a long career as an academic and teacher in the field of sexual abuse in the Catholic Church and the safeguarding of minors and vulnerable persons. She has served as Dean of the Faculties of Human Sciences and Philosophy at St. Paul University in Ottawa and Executive Director of the Center for Child Protection at the Gregorian University in Rome, where she taught a course in the safeguarding of minors. In 2019, Demasure founded the Interdisciplinary Center for Safeguarding Minors and Vulnerable Persons and is Professor Emeritus at St. Paul University in Ottawa. Currently, Dr. Demasure continues to teach in this important field, and we are so glad to have her speak to us today. Welcome.
Thank you.
So Concerned Lay Catholics is doing a series of which this interview is a part, as part of a reflection on the 5th anniversary of the Papal Synod on Clergy Sexual Abuse, which took place in February 2019. Dr. Demasure, since then, what, if anything, has changed?
Yes, of course, things have changed because we make progress. For many, it's not fast enough, but we do make progress. So, for instance, the first thing I need to mention is the Vos Estis Lux Mundi document that was, like, say, to be as an example or was not really voted upon or not. Yeah, well, how should I say it? Anyway, it was just an essay, let's a trial. And then in 2023, finally, it became an official document. And this official document in 2023 of Vos Estis Lux Mundi is important for at least two things. First of all, we got a definition of what is a vulnerable person, and it was accepted officially that a vulnerable person, an adult, could also be abused. That was an important step. The second step was that from then on, also bishops could be uh, condemned, punished, not only if they abuse by themselves, but also because of negligence or because of cover up. So those are two important things that once the document became official in 2023, um, became something that we put in place also with the bishops of Canada. We have put in place a mechanism where people can denounce a bishop who didn't act properly. The second thing is that there has been a revision of Book 6 of the canon law. I'm not going to explain the whole canon law. It's very complicated. In fact, at the end, there are so many laws that we have to look at. What kind of law do we have to apply here? But one thing is very important, and it is that sexual abuse is not seen anymore as a transgression of the celibacy, but as an attempt to the human dignity. So it's not focused on the perpetrator anymore, transgression of celibacy, but on the victim, because the victim is touched in her or his dignity. And the third thing that's important since 2019, I think it's the Synod. And the Synod, of course, it's not only about abuse, we all know that, but we are sure that the abuse cases have played a role in deciding, in discerning for the Pope to organize such a Synod.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that background. There definitely has been changes, as you had summarized there, including the one for canon law, which is quite binding throughout the church. Now, we understand that you are engaged in a major research project regarding restoring trust in the church. Can you tell us a little bit about that research?
Yes, if we look at the analysis before of sexual abuse, of course, it is about sex, although the church often doesn't like to talk too much about sex, but it's sexual abuse and not other forms of abuse. And it was always said it's an abuse of power. It's true, it is an abuse of power, but it's, and first and foremost, it is an abuse of trust. Because if there is no trust between two people, you will not be able to abuse sexually. You have to have access to someone, and you have to make this person trust you. So it's very important that we start to think about sexual abuse as abuse of sexuality, abuse of power, but also as abuse of trust. And so we did an exercise, an international exercise, and we interviewed people from all over the world to ask them first, what is trust to you? Secondly, have the scandals abused your faith and your trust in the church? And thirdly, the third axis was, how do you think the church, what should they do? What should the church do to restore trust? So we had interviews at this point 44 from India, from East Europe, from West Europe, from North America, from Latin America. I hope I didn't forget a continent because we did all continents except for Australia, in fact. So we every time we had around 7 persons, sometimes one less, sometimes one more, and they answered those questions. Many of them were victims, but there are also people who work with victims. And also a point for me that is really very important. They never talk about the secondary victims or tertiary victims, which means that all the friends, all the families, or those who are abused are also suffering. And the Catholic community as a whole is suffering. It's as if it didn't touch us, but we are all affected. So I find it very important also to let people talk who feel this fact that they are so hurt because of the abuses. So we did our project is in 3 years, and first of all, I did some theoretical research on trust. Then we did the interviews, and now we have almost analyzed the interviews, and we are going to talk about it. So we will have a big conference in November, the beginning of November at St. Paul University, in which we will present the results of our research. But also we are going to ask other people who think and work on trust to come and talk to us. And the, the final aim, in fact, is, and that's for next year, is to develop a tool that can be used in parishes and dioceses and that can help to restore trust. And we find inspirations in two fields. And the first field is the field of restorative justice, because they have lots of experience with talking with people who have been hurt. And the second is the synod, because what I liked very much of the synod is the round tables. They were sitting around a round table, and a table is uniting people. It creates community. And secondly, it was a mix of lay persons, of priests, of religious, of bishops, cardinals also. So I think that the table should be mixed. And what we are going to develop then, with the help of the people who did the interviews, but also with others who are willing to collaborate, it is to develop a guide, a kind of a guide, like what kind of questions can you ask? You have to be careful for what? Someone who is dominating or someone who is attacking someone. And then finally, we hope to create some courses or some webinars and some workshops at St. Paul to do the formation of people who can lead those circles so that they are trauma informed. So that's the research.
Rich and so very important for the church. Can I ask you on a personal level, what made you interested in this field? Why do you think it's so important for our church?
What the trust are working on safeguarding?
All of it.
Well, working on safeguarding, I started to work on safeguarding when I was teaching in secondary school, because it was a girls' school. At that time in Belgium, schools were not mixed, a Catholic girls' school. And so we saw that many girls were abused at home. But none of us, no one knew how to how to act, Do we have to go to the police in Belgium? Do we have to talk to the parents? Do we have to put this child in an institution? What do we have to do? And so I found this unacceptable. And so I went back to Leuven to make a doctorate. At that point, I already had 4 children, so I knew how important it was that children were protected. And I worked on incest at that point. And by working on incest and reading a lot, I saw also the problems in the Catholic Church. It's also a community. And incest is really, it's very difficult to act against incest because it's not an institution. You almost have to go to every home or house, and you cannot just ask, I'm sorry, is there incest here? But what you see in incest is that relation of trust plays a very big role, because the children have been raised by their father or like their uncle or a nephew. They have this trust relationship. They play together. The father is educating the child, so there is a really big trust relationship. And then it is this trust that is broken. And you can ask every therapist, they're all going to say the thing that is most difficult to restore after abuse is trust. They lose trust in everyone. And they have, because they lose trust, it's very difficult to have a good relationship with someone because they're always suspicious. They don't want to give themselves to that person because they are afraid. They did it once and look, it led to this abuse. So, like, trying to see and reflecting on how to restore trust is really important because it has not been done. There's no work in the church till now on how to restore trust. And people left the church because they don't trust the church anymore. So, yeah.
That is so interesting. You know, despite our church's theological sources that we can reach to think about and restore trust, as a Catholic community, we don't quite have the tools, perhaps an interdisciplinary tools, to be able to do that. So I'm excited about your work, and the fruits that it can produce, especially in restoring trust at all levels in the church. Now, a lot of lay people will probably not be able to take your course, but for the ordinary layperson, what would you like them to know about your work, whether that's your research or what you teach? Just, if you think about the many, many people that go to church on Sunday, what are some things you'd like for them to know about this field and this important work?
Well, for lay people, and it's a difference with the pastoral workers, for instance, I would hope that if there are tables that get organized in their parishes and in their dioceses, that they contribute to that, that they go. Because we have seen in our research, one of the main consequences or things that became clear is that if people trust someone, it's because they know him, because they, for instance, a priest, they have studied with him or they work together with him. And we have so many people who say in our research, we don't trust any priest anymore. But priest so and so, I studied with him, that one is an exception. So we see that trust is built from beneath, from below. It comes from the roots. And so it's very important that parishes contribute to this restoration of trust, because the restoration of trust is not going to be with another document from the Pope, with another law of the Pope. Those laws have to be there. I agree, because it's also because there were no laws and no punishments that this abuse could continue. But it's not enough. It's not only top down. No, it has to be constructed in the parishes or in other Christian communities. So I hope that we could communicate, and they don't have to follow the course, but there will be webinars. And so I hope that we will able to communicate how bad trust is affected, first of all, what the consequences are on faith if trust is affected, and then thirdly, how it can be restored, so that they have really those three big axes in their head.
That's wonderful. The restoration of trust from below upwards. And I can see now how the synodal process is deeply related to this, as well as restorative justice. As the church becomes more synodal, we learn to listen to one another, to listen not only for understanding, but to listen for hearts, listen for wisdom. And I think these are important sources for us to build trust, rebuild trust potentially. I know restorative justice has a particular process, the circle conversations, which I know the synodal process itself can also learn from. So that's wonderful work that you're doing, but also a wonderful message for our lay people to know. What would you like our pastoral leaders and clergy in our church to know about your work, your research?
Well, I would hope that some of them follow the workshop on how to lead such a circle, so that they are trauma informed and that they have the communication skills, the conversation skills, because we are not going to call it restorative justice, we are going to call it restorative dialogue. But how do you manage such a circle? Because I'm also following some courses, because someone can always learn. And I saw, I was in St. Louis 2 weeks ago, and I saw in the circle a man who immediately took over and who didn't follow the rules, like everyone's opinion is worth to be heard. So he said, it's good that you do that. You have to hold your stand. That's what you have to do. But that's really not how this kind of conversation should take place. So I hope that we have a number of pastoral leaders, lay priests or other, but those who have a leadership function in the church, that they come and get a formation on how to lead such circles, how to create them, because we are going to work together with Kathy about a pilot project, because that's what we first are going to do, to have some pilots and see what we can learn from our mistakes there, but also what we certainly have to take with us for further development. So what we are looking for then are partners, so as such as the concerned lay people, but also other groups, like would you like to work together, and we can learn from you and you can learn from us, and let's create an atmosphere in the church that becomes more positive, and that would like the church to be the church that it should be, let's say. Yeah.
Wonderful. That segues very well with my final question. And it's the question that we were all posed at the beginning of the synod, that we were all around the world were asked to share. What are our fears? What are our hopes along our faith journey or along our pilgrimage on earth? And you've shared some beautiful hopes, the restoration of trust, a community that fosters trust and restores trust. If I might ask you as our final question, what are your fears and hopes in your work in the church that we belong to, in your
My
journey?
fears is that it for many people already is too late, that they will not be willing to work on restore trust because they have been so disappointed uh, because of the way they have been treated by the church, and not only the abuse, but are not being heard, not being believed. Then in our interviews, we also hear it as someone in justice. He gets the judge says it's true, you have been abused, and that's the fine they have to pay you. And then the church go into appeal. But it's not so good to restore trust. That it was clear that they have been abused. So I think that for a number of people it's too late. That's my fear. And yeah, you don't. Uh, in the Bible, it says we have to go after the lost sheep. Eh? So I hope they are not so far away, those sheep, that we can't get them back to the big, how do you say it in English?
Mhm.
To the big,
Flock.
yeah, community. Oh, yeah, yeah, thank you.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so that's my fear. My hope is that there are enough people there who are, they might be hurt, but who are still willing to try to do something good and to help to rebuild the church, not the church as it was. Let me be clear, because that's a church that has abused in every single continent. I can tell you because of my interviews everywhere. So that's not the kind of church we want. But we want a church that really lives like the gospel, that follows the gospel. It's for me, it's my big motivation. Uh, Mostly, I have to say the human Jesus. So I really, I cannot stand injustice, and I cannot stand that people who are vulnerable, like minors or other people who are going for pastoral care or whatever, are mistreated or abused. So I think that for me, the human Jesus and how he stood up, because I worked like for 30 years in the field. Don't think they were so happy when I started to work on that topic. So, but then I always thought, they weren't very happy with Jesus as well. I'm not like Jesus, but I thought, there was also opposition. Just go on. And the thing I want to say for everyone who is working in the field of safeguarding, just go on.
It's wonderful, wonderful wisdom that you've shared there. On behalf of Concerned Lay Catholics, I thank you so much for your insight, your research, your tireless work, and your passion. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.